This presentation covers thermal SuperPoint SLAM. Our project involves thermal cameras sensitive to the long-wave infrared spectrum. These cameras come with a number of advantages for navigation. They can operate in the absence of visible light, and they are robust to changes in illumination and visual obscurance. However, these cameras also present challenges. They are low contrast, experience significant motion blur, and require large image interruptions to combat noise. These challenges prevent handcrafted feature detectors from performing well on thermal images. Recently, SuperPoint was introduced as a better alternative to handcrafted feature detectors for thermal images. It is built off of SuperPoint, which is a self-supervised framework for training feature detection and description networks. Inspired by SuperPoint, the goal of our project is to train a thermal SuperPoint network and vocabulary and integrate them within OrbSLAM 2. This presentation will be divided into the 4 steps listed here: thermal image preprocessing, thermal SuperPoint training, vocabulary generation, and the final integration. First, it is necessary to quickly explain the stages of training SuperPoint. First, a network called MagicPoint is trained on synthetic images. Then MagicPoint is used to generate pseudo-ground truth key points on the training and validation images. And finally, the SuperPoint network is trained using that ground truth. We made the assumption that raw 16-bit thermal imagery is not compatible with the synthetic images used to train MagicPoint. Therefore, we apply contrast enhancement techniques and convert the images to 8-bit before training. The figure compares a number of techniques. In the end, we chose contrast-limited adaptive histogram equalization, or CLAHE. An issue with applying CLAHE frame by frame is that it causes artificial brightness changes that may affect performance, but we decided to accept this trade-off. We use a third-party SuperPoint implementation called PyTorch SuperPoint for training. The repository includes a pre-trained MagicPoint network and a pre-trained RGB SuperPoint network that was trained on 80,000 images in the COCO dataset. We use the pre-trained MagicPoint to generate pseudo-ground truth and train our thermal SuperPoint network on the FLIR thermal dataset. This dataset contains images taken from a car. A sample of the images are shown here. This figure compares the feature tracking performance on thermal images of our thermal SuperPoint network against the pre-trained RGB SuperPoint network and 2 handcrafted feature methods, Orb and Sift. Both SuperPoint networks greatly outperform the handcrafted methods. Interestingly, the RGB SuperPoint network outperforms our thermal SuperPoint network. This may be because we trained on a relatively small and homogeneous dataset. With the SuperPoint network in hand, we then needed to generate a DVOW2 vocabulary, which is used by OrbSLAM 2 for many purposes. The vocabulary is a discretization of descriptor space that allows for efficient similarity scoring between images. The vocabulary is generated from a set of descriptors by recursively applying k-means clustering up to a certain number of times. We used the same FLIR thermal dataset to generate our vocabulary with 9,000 images and 2.7 million descriptors in total. We compare our vocabulary against the Orb vocabulary included with OrbSLAM 2 and an RGB SuperPoint vocabulary included in an existing SuperPoint OrbSLAM 2 integration. Our first observation is that the other 2 vocabularies have a much larger number of words, and each fills out the entire vocabulary tree. This may once again be due to our limited dataset. Next, we compare the ability of each vocabulary to score similarity between images. We test on progressively dissimilar frames of a video and try various combinations of SuperPoint networks and vocabularies. In almost every case, similarity is ranked correctly, but the Orb vocabulary is more discriminative. Finally, we integrate both the network and vocabulary into OrbSLAM 2. As was previously mentioned, there is an existing integration of SuperPoint in OrbSLAM 2. However, it is not directly compatible with the networks we trained using the PyTorch SuperPoint repository. Without time to properly add support, we use a workaround that involves pre-computing key points and descriptors offline and later importing them. As a baseline, we ran standard OrbSLAM 2 on sequence 3 of the Kitty dataset. The full trajectory is shown on the left and a small part of the sequence is shown on the right. To validate our integration, we tested SuperPoint SLAM on Kitty sequence 3 with the RGB SuperPoint network trained using PyTorch SuperPoint. The results confirm that our integration is functional. Next, we tested standard OrbSLAM 2 on a thermal camera sequence. It was not able to initialize. Finally, we tested SuperPoint SLAM with our thermal SuperPoint network on thermal images. It appears to perform better than OrbSLAM 2 and does initialize. However, the initial point cloud seems incorrect and it loses track a short amount of time into the sequence. We've shown that our thermal SuperPoint network and the pre-trained RGB SuperPoint network appear better than Orb and SIFT at tracking features in thermal image sequences. We've also shown that our thermal SuperPoint vocabulary can correctly rank the similarity of images. However, the Orb vocabulary is more discriminative. The SuperPoint OrbSlam2 integration we put together is functional, but still failed on thermal images. The performance may be able to be improved with better parameter tuning, a larger and more diverse training dataset, or an improved contrast enhancement method. Additionally, it may be possible to leverage the larger amount of information contained in the raw 16-bit images by training and running directly on them.